talk about.
It's quite poor. Hello, my name is Ian. This channel is all about music and art, and this is where we talk about music and art. And in this series of videos, we've been looking at what's been happening regarding music streaming in the UK. The UK government's Digital Culture, Media and Sports Committee have been looking into the ways that the streaming platforms and other large record companies manage payments to songwriters, musicians and performers. And on the 15th of October 2020, UK Parliament published a news article stating that the Digital Culture, Media and Sports Committee were going to inquire into the impact of the streaming on the future of the music industry. The article stated that the inquiry would consider whether the government should take action to protect the industry from piracy in the wake of steps taken by the EU on copyright and intellectual property rights. Now, I knew that there were some high-profile musicians and music industry types who were giving evidence to the committee. And the first of these meetings was on the 24th of November 2020, with another meeting on the 8th of December. And now these were long meetings lasting over 3 hours. So what I've done is I've decided to edit them down into shorter videos, and the links to all the previous meeting videos are in the description down below. The Digital Culture, Media and Sports Committee is now back in session, and they have 2 more meetings. We've just uploaded the meetings from January the 19th, 2021, and now we're going to cover the February the 4th meetings. And there is another meeting scheduled for the 10th of February, which will include when it's available. And it's worth providing a background to the witnesses giving evidence on this session from the 4th of February 2021. First, we have Yvette Griffiths, who is co-chief executive and executive director of Jazz Refresh. Her career has spanned both theatre, music, film and the management of major corporate events, companies and teams. This experience spans over 30 years, with most of it being in the senior management positions in the arts. We also have Pacifico, who is the Chief Executive of the Association of Independent Music, AIMS, which represents over 800 UK independent music companies, and he was previously CFO of the Featured Artist Coalition, FAC, a position that he held since January 2015. He was also president of the International Artists Organisation prior to joining FAC. Pacifico spent almost 10 years in the city in banking and strategy consultancy before leaving to focus on Specific Music in 2005. Specific Music is a creative music consultancy which designs and delivers bespoke music for industry clients as well as brands and charities. He also set up the All Star Collective, which is made up to 40 of the world's top session musicians. He continues to perform and record in his band Pacifico Blues. And lastly, we have Rupert Skellett, who is the General Counsel at Beggars Group. Rupert got the job when Martin Mills, the owner of Beggars, decided he wanted in-house person. Mills had already been doing the job for a couple of years, and essentially he was a natural choice and has been with Beggars for 20 years. All of the sessions for these committees were chaired by Julian Knight, and the complete list of committee members and the relevant links are in the description down below. This recording is made in agreement with the UK Parliament Terms and Conditions, which states I cannot alter the video and audio of the recording in any way. I can't use this material for satire or use it on a website or social media platform that promotes, encourages or facilitates illegal activity or encourages hatred and antisocial behaviour. So here is part 2 from the session from the 4th of February 2021 into the economics of music streaming.
Thank you, Kevin. Damien Hines.
Thanks, Julian. Rupert, can I ask you, just coming on the back of what Kevin was asking you about earlier. So you pay a higher royalty rate, you're fairer, it's a more personal way of doing business. You have a vocation, belief in the power of music. You're also a pretty big organisation with access to marketing resource. So why are artists still signing with the majors?
Well, the majors have deeper pockets than we do, sadly. They dominate the singles market, and you've got to bear in mind that streaming services are centered around the individual track. So the big winners of the new streaming economy are essentially those in the singles market, which we're not really. Our focus is the albums market, and those entities who have big catalogues. And the majors tick both boxes. You've seen their record.
So are you saying you don't want more acts who would be more focused on the singles market?
Well,
or is it just the way life has turned out?
Well, what we find is the situation, it's very competitive at all levels. It's competitive between artists, it's competitive between content, it's competitive between platforms, but it's very competitive between labels. And we've found where we have had artists that are successful in the singles market, like grime artists, when they come to the end of the deal, the majors swoop in, offer them silly money, and that's it. And fair play to them, they go for the big money, which we can't fault them for.
So let me broaden this out to all three of you, if I may, whoever wants to answer. So whether we talk about Beggars or any other organisation, one of the big sort of unanswered questions in all this is if the deals the majors are offering are so unattractive to artists and so bad for music, why doesn't somebody else offer a better deal? What are the barriers to entry, either to indie labels or to anybody else, frankly, who would come into this market, who could who could split that margin in a fairer way, and presumably would then sign up a load of great acts and make a lot of money both for the act and for the label and be making great music? Why doesn't that happen? Who wants to come in?
Can I jump straight in on that, Pat? I think we highlighted three key problems in the market, and those are access to capital, access to skills, and access to scale. And I think, in terms of access to capital, I know we've proposed the idea of a creative industries tax incentive that would sit alongside the one that already exists for film and computer games, TV, animation, and others. That would really, really help independents make investments. But also, to Mr. Brennan's point, how do credible artists actually get to a point where they can have a sustainable career, or how can people investing in them get a return on capital? Particularly in credible niches where they're not going to be in the hundreds of millions of streams a month, but they may be in the tens of millions of streams a year. We do have a suggestion for how that might be addressed, and we sort of put forward the idea of applying a digressive scale where your first million streams become the most valuable streams, and that by the time you get up to the sort of 100 million stream, it might be worth a little bit less, and that would take a little bit
Paul, forgive me interrupting you, but just all those are important points, and we'll come on to them. But just on the specific question of what stops Beggars getting bigger or having an offshoot, or other companies that deal in other parts of the media or indeed other parts of music coming into this arena or growing in this arena and offering a service which is better for the artist, still good for the consumer, and fairer all round. We're just not clear why that doesn't happen.
It does happen. We see it happening, and when those businesses scale, they tend to be acquired by the majors, who grow by acquisition, where the independents grow by investing directly in artists.
Okay.
This week alone, we saw the announcement of the acquisition of AWOL by Sony, which has a client base of some tens of thousands of artists and independent labels accessing the market through their systems. We see new businesses coming to market all the time, growing and having success in spite of the obstacles that we've articulated.
Thanks, Paul. And anybody else want to add to that? What stops others growing in this market? Yvette?
Ultimately it does. It works. It fundamentally boils down to capital. The majors have so much more money to do what they do. That's ultimately what it boils down to. There are indies who are punching above their weight and doing phenomenally well, working with different models, and also because the majors have so much more money, on a very, very basic level, we've got the majors will pay advances, and quite sizable advances. Now, you're going to have some artists who, in all reality, they're not actually even ever looking to recoup because the advance was that great. Do you know what I mean? And so that is very, very attractive to a lot of artists that are coming in through onto the scene. You know, whether they recoup or not, it's very, very attractive to have those large amounts. Do you know what I mean? We as a boutique niche organisation, we have on a couple of occasions had majors approach us, basically wanting us to be A&R to then slot our artists into their organizations and, you know, kind of suck all the goodness out of us as an organization and, you know, take all the rights from the artist in perpetuity. You know, there are lots of different facets. It's not just one answer, but money and capital absolutely is, I'd say, the key one.
Can I just get on a different line? The different money flows and splits of revenue in this industry are, I mean, incredibly difficult for any normal person to try and get their head around. And you run up against, in the stream world, you get run up against this distinction between you know, whether something should count as a physical sale in old money terms or should count as, you know, radio play, rental, whatever. The majors obviously want streaming to count as a physical sale, I think, because the maths then, you know, just works out better for that part of the industry. Do you think streaming should count as a sale or should it count as a rent?
Is that to me?
Anyway, Yvette, go on. Yeah.
Can I? Okay, I'm gonna answer in a reverse way. What I think is that there needs to be a modernisation and review of the landscape as it exists. But in answer to your specific question, it's a sale. It's a sale. Basically, just the same way you would go into a shop and buy a CD or vinyl. You're listening. You're buying permission to listen to that track. When you're streaming, you're buying permission to listen to that track for the period of your subscription for your own personal use.
Isn't that okay? That sounds a bit like the distinction between buying a car at a dealer and getting a car at Hertz. you are buying in both cases, but in one case you're buying time, and the other one you're buying a metal asset. I mean, the fact that when your subscription ends, you give the thing back, isn't that actually the definition of renting, not buying?
Well, no, because you've had it for that time. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
No. I just thought I might be able to help here. I think it's a good question to debate, and I think it's absolutely right and proper that this is an area for the committee to inquire upon. It's a hot topic in the music industry, and I think there are two things. One is the sort of legal status of what's actually happening, and the other is the contractual implications and how people get paid. I think if people cleaned up their legacy contracts and actually did the sort of thing that Rupert's talked about Beggars doing, then the discussion about rental or sale becomes a lot easier to have, because it's a clearer conversation rather than the vested interest of what that means in how you get paid. When it comes to the rental versus sale, when you rent something, you pay, you get it for a period of time, you give it back, like the car you mentioned, or a Blockbuster video for those in my generation that remember. With a stream, I think it's more like a mobile phone package where you buy a certain number of minutes, you use them and you buy them again. Now, you can choose to have the same conversation with the same person over and over again, but you're still buying new minutes each time. And I think streaming is a bit more like that.
Actually, I'd say it's more like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Because you're right, with the mobile phone, you get a finite number of minutes and then you're in for buying more. That's not the way it works in a typical streaming.
Typical phone contract, you can buy infinite number of minutes in the same way. That's
a different phone contract. Yes, true. I guess this sort of slightly illustrates the point that in trying to fit a new medium, you know, a new way of doing business, a new way of consuming media, hearing music, loving music, in trying to define it in old world terms, is it the radio or is it buying a record? I mean, clearly it's neither. It's just different. And don't we need a new and different way to reflect this new and different world, Yvette?
Yeah, no, well, I completely agree. And that's kind of where I was coming from when I said there needs to be a modernisation with regular review of how the industry is currently working in these areas, because it isn't exactly one or the other. Do you know what I mean? And streaming has become the largest area of focus for listeners and for streamers. That's where the majority of the business is happening. And so we need to find a way to redress that balance so that it is fairer for everybody all round.
Okay, and I think Paul wanted to come in and then I'm done. Paul.
Thank you. I think a big concern in the analogy with broadcast, if we go too close to it, is that broadcast operates under a blanket license. Any radio can play any song they like, so long as they get a license from PPL. And that represents a loss of rights to the rights holder, whether that's the artist direct or if they're going through a label. So you're into a blanket licensing position, which is paying out a compensation for lost rights rather than a commercial negotiation for the best possible price. Our concern is that actually on a per listener basis, radio pays out up to something like 100 times less than a streaming platform at the moment. What we'd like to see is revenue maximised for the industry, but to make absolutely sure and clear that that revenue is shared appropriately and properly.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Damien. Clive Efford. Clive. You're muted, Clive.
I'd unmuted. I thought I'd unmuted. I beg your pardon. Can I ask you about A&R? I listened to what you the answers you gave to the chair earlier on. Is there a difference in the way that you approach or use A&R? Because you described that there's a sort of difference in philosophical approach from your companies to the big majors. So is there a difference to the way that you use it or your approach to it? I don't know which one of you wants to answer. Paul, would you like to start?
Very, very happy to start. I'll go back to one of my earlier comments that independents tend to build value through the direct investment with artists in their careers, where majors tend to build value through acquisition of those catalogues. We're not data driven. It's not sign anything so long as the social media metrics are going the right direction. It's sign something because you really believe there's something to build there with the artist.
I don't know if Rupert or Yvette, you were saying that you sometimes are approached by the majors to use their A&R to sign your artists and use you. I mean, do you feel like at times that you're a stepping stone for artists towards bigger and greater things, or is that a cruel way of describing it?
Well, to be honest with you, that's kind of our intention. To be honest with you, if we have an artist that's been through the Jazz Refresh machine, let's call it, because we're more than a label, we are live promoters, we do a number of other things as well. If we have an artist that comes through our machine and at some point in their career moving beyond their debut release with us, they then are signed by a larger organisation. That's kind of the objective. We want them to grow and progress in their career because we'll never be a major. We don't have aspirations to be a major. Do you know what I mean? We always want to work on that pipeline of talent coming through. We don't sign multi-release deals. It's about providing opportunities. So it's in the context of we want to do what we do fiercely, independently, and then, letting the artists and their music out into the universe. That's kind of how we are. What we don't want is a major coming trying to swallow us up. Do you know what I mean? And just using us because we're very good at talent spotting.
And is there a difference in the proportion of A&R in terms of revenue that you would see invested from a major to one of the indies?
I can only talk for myself. Rupert can speak for Beggars, and Amy Paul has a broader view of the rest of the AIM community. But certainly the majors put a lot more money into A&R than we do. They absolutely do. More money,
but that's inevitable, I would say. But as a proportion, do they put more in?
I don't know the inner workings of the majors, I have to say.
Rupert, I can think Paul wants to come in. I can see Paul indicating.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Efford, I don't actually know the answer to that question.
Right.
If I can contribute, I remember from the evidence session given by the majors, they did indicate some figures, I think, in their evidence. And that certainly on a proportional basis would be in line with the data we get back from the independent community. I would say, though, what I see is the efficiency, the sweat equity and the specialist knowledge in the independent community means it's not really an accurate barometer. £1 invested by an independent, I would say, is probably worth £1,000 invested by a major.
And has what's invested in established artists, has there been a shift between what's invested through A&R in established artists and up and coming new talent, say over the last 10 years or more?
Well, I would say that there is a lot of financial modelling going on right now, so that And it goes back to what I was saying earlier slightly. If you do have a track record, you are able to bring financial models to bear and work out on quite a, I don't know, accurate basis, but you can work out what you might be able to afford for an advance. And that's why I think you have companies like Hypnosis becoming involved, because it's come to the attention of the city and private equity and that sort of thing. It's moved to become the sort of asset, a sort of liquid asset.
Can I just move on to what's included in A&R by the big majors? What's included that you would say maybe shouldn't be, or is not appropriate to be included in A&R? I mean, such as is it appropriate to include advances and royalties and ancillary costs? Is that an appropriate way of calculating what's actually invested in, what is effectively the industry's research and development?
I think advances, certainly, yes, would be A&R. I would definitely categorise it as that.
And is that similar for you? Would you would include exactly what is included by the majors in the same way? You would use it in the same way?
I don't have their list of categories, but if you supply it to me, I can certainly check it against the one that we have. Okay, well maybe we can do that. And it does it include production costs? Are they expected to be covered by the artists themselves, or are they covered by things like advances, the part of A&R? By production costs, do you mean recording costs, or do you mean physical production costs?
I would say, whatever is appropriate, in the circumstances where the artist, whatever the artist is producing, whether it's production costs for performing or recording, what is it appropriate for those costs to be included, or are they included in A&R?
I would say that recording costs, yes, are categorizable in A&R category. I would say production costs of, say, physical records are not categorizable as A&R.
Okay, and Paul?
Thank you. I was just going to comment on the important distinction between what is recoupable from the artist's share and what is part of becomes the label's investment. And I think you might find differences of practice between independents and majors in that regard. I think Yvette's touched on that already. And the only other comment I would make is that I would hope that catalogue acquisition costs are treated as separate from the A&R in the spirit of investing directly in artists and their careers.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Clive. Giles Watling.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, a lot of what I wanted to cover was just covered by Clive, actually, funny enough. But I just want to touch on one little thing. Earlier, Yvette, you mentioned the recoupment packages, which clearly, obviously, are payable by artists through contract in one form or another. Now, could they be regarded, this might be a silly parallel, but could they be regarded somehow like student loans, and as much as that you only pay them back if you start getting the money in, and therefore, could it be regarded as sort of fair dues, would you say?
Yeah, that's a really, really good comparison, actually, in terms of student loans. From the first sale, there is recoupment taking place. And there is a point at which, if that recoupment hasn't happened, that it's written off. I'd like to say that we have recouped on the majority of our releases over the years. So we haven't been in a position where we've had to do that as yet. But yeah, we try to keep the costs down low, and as soon as that recoupment has happened, the sales happen, the recoupment happens at the same time, and as soon as those costs have been recouped, the artist and the label can then enjoy, from our perspective, the royalties that come in for those sales or streams, etc.
Okay, and like student loans, is there a point where you write it off if it doesn't recoup as you would wish?
Yeah, I think the entire industry is probably the same in that sense. In terms of indies and majors, there is a point at which it's written off.
Right. Are you not vulnerable and losing out on a potential income stream? I think we touched on it earlier. But for instance, what proportion of artists in your repertoire are upstreamed by major labels?
Oh goodness! In terms of percentage, a healthy percentage, really. I mean, we're still comparatively quite a young label. We've had some real success stories with our artists, and we work in a different way to a lot of the other indies and certainly the majors, in the sense that we recognize our place in the ecosystem, and it's that first opportunity. Perhaps there's something we could or should be doing in terms of getting some kind of guarantees of future life success for those artists. But currently what happens is, we work almost as a development organization, who the cherry on the cake is the release that we give that artist and the spotlight that we can give them and the international showcasing that we can give them. And all of that puts them in a really wonderful position for, the Concords of this world and for the Impulse of this world, who are all sub-labels. They're all sub-labels and imprints of the major. Do you know what I mean? To then kind of fly higher, the Blue Notes, the Deckers, etc.
Yeah, sure. And you're happy with that? I mean, from the evidence you've given so far this afternoon, it would appear that you're very comfortable where you are. You don't want to move or expand, or is there movement and expansion for you?
I think we want to expand in the context of what we already do. We'd love to be able to support more artists in the way that we do. We may even look at some point into 2 or 3 release deals. But at this point, for us, it really is about expanding, if we had greater capital, to actually do more of what we do on this level. We don't want to be a major. That's not what we're looking to do.
All right. Okay. I'd like to move on to a different topic slightly, to Rupert, actually, on this one. As you know, that in the US, any artist who was signed after, I think it was 1978, can recapture their rights after 35 years. That isn't the case here. Have any of your artists recaptured their copyrights after 35 years in the US?
Yes, they have. I'm sad to say. Legally, there are a lot of arguments you can throw at this issue, especially if you have an English law jurisdiction contract with sound recordings. I think it's pretty clear with music publishing with the song rights. But if that happens, if we get a termination notice, we will not get into a litigation with our artist. I mean, that is not where we want to be. So what we will try to do to try and persuade them to stay with us is to offer them, improvements to the existing deal that we have with them.
Yeah, I understand that in this country, the company has to either go bust or there has to be some other sort of major upheaval to happen for artists to recapture their rights. So from what you're saying, Rupert, you're sort of not in favour of us introducing a similar sort of system here.
Well, no, because we do still try and get wherever possible life for copyright deals. We're in the business of recordings on a long-term basis. I've been at Beggars for 21 years. I mean, there are many people here who've been here for over 30 years. We've been going for over 40 years. We sell a sort of long-term vision in terms of the recordings we make with our artists while they're signed to us. We're their partners for the life of copyrighted recordings. So if we were to suddenly lose that right here in the UK, that would be pretty disastrous for us. We can accommodate the US termination because obviously the US termination only just applies to the US, and we're still free to offer enticements for the rest of the world and for them to stay with us and not terminate the US rights.
But don't you think it's fair for the artists to be able to recapture their rights at some point, even if it's not 35 years?
Well, quite often we're involved in making the recordings with the artists. I mean, as I say, we definitely see it as a part. There are other alternatives an artist can explore. They're very free. They're free contractually after a certain period of time to re-record the recordings. Obviously, sometimes that's not practicable, but sadly, we do have a few artists who have done that. So it's not like the publishing right, where once you have it, you have it, and you can't duplicate it at all. There's nothing to stop someone duplicating your sound recording, sadly, as a record.
I think I get your point, but Yvette wants to come in and so does Paul. But Yvette first. Yvette.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to build a little bit upon what Rupert's saying, that, you know, as commercial businesses, there is kind of an element of, you know, there has to be that income coming into the organisation from kind of, you know, historical deals, etc. And, you know, as long as the artist is absolutely clear of what they are signing up to, then I think, you know, as long as there's a constant dialogue and there's all the transparency around that, then, you know, I'm in support of that. As Jazz Refresh, we made a different call. We were, some of our releases were licensed, some of our releases we had the copyright to, we own the masters. But we made a decision fairly recently that actually, because of our position in the ecosystem, and because we are a not-for-profit and we're not a commercial organisation, and we do receive some support from the likes of the Arts Council, recognising the work that we do on the landscape for emerging talent, that, you know, parceled up into this, us trying to encourage artists to fly into, you know, the bigger wide recording world, we made a decision to become a licensing label. And so we don't own the copyright, we license the copyright for a period of time. At that end of period, we can negotiate with the artist and they may choose to let us, you know, license for another period, or they may fly and take it elsewhere. It's a risk and it's a gamble, but it's the choice that we've made. Now, I think we're probably fairly unusual in that context, but it's just, again, giving you an example of the diversity of different examples of deals that exist within the indie landscape.
And you need that income stream. Paul, sorry, please.
Thank you. It's really interesting hearing from both Yvette and Rupert on this, because they represent such different facets of the very broad spectrum of independent businesses. You know, Yvette's business does license deals, and those are very prevalent in the independent community. I would say more prevalent than life of copyright deals on the whole. That does leave independents that are trying to work for the long term with artists vulnerable to upstreaming from the majors when they come in and offer very, very large advances that independents can't compete with. I'm not sure Yvette was quite correct when she said that the majors write off unrecouped balances. I'm not sure that is their practice. But if they were to follow Beggars on that, then I think the conversation about the 35-year rule becomes an easier one, doesn't it?
I would imagine so. Yvette, come back on that?
No, I thought that was the case. I thought I heard that in the hearings earlier with the majors. If I'm incorrect, then I'm incorrect on that.
Okay, answered. And just one final question to all three of you. What impact would it have if the UK mirrored the US in this regard in the 35-year rule? What impact would it have on the industry? Paul?
I think it would vary by label. I think labels that are doing license deals would presumably not be impacted by it. There is an important but minority part of the independent community that does life of copyright deals, and I think they would rebalance the calculations they use for the size of advances and the other elements of the deal accordingly.
Right, thank you. Rupert, do you think?
It would severely inhibit our ability to invest in new artists, because, I mean, generally speaking, new artists is quite often a loss-making proposal, and our business model relies on the fantastic catalogue we've been so lucky to acquire over the last 40 years. So if we were to lose that, if that was terminable, then that would have a massive impact on our business, and it would definitely dry up our ability to invest in new artists.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to ask is what impact it would have on the industry as a whole. And I just wondered if you had a view on that. Would you have to change your modus operandi? Well,
you would need to come up with some other. I mean, the role of the record label is principally to fund new artists. They are the sort of engine. They provide, if you will, the sort of foundations for an artist's career. If the record labels can't do that, you've got to ask yourself who will step in and provide that risk investment. And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, if you look at publishers, they don't have the margin. If you look at the live industry, they don't have the margin or the inclination, even when live was doing great. You know, they didn't really dabble in that. So then you're thrown at the mercy, I don't know, the tech platforms or...
Right, okay, fair enough, thank you. Yvette, have you got anything to add on that? Or?
I don't think I would add anything different to either Paul or Rupert's response, to be honest with you. It would change. You know, for us as a licensing label, it would make absolutely no difference. But for those who do have life of copyright deals, things would have to change, you know, and it would reduce the opportunity for potentially for new artists.
New artists. Okay. I think we've got the message loud and clear. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Back to you. Thank you.
So thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video. All the best now. Cheers. Bye-bye.